As promised, Maisey Yates, The Last Christmas Cowboy, the Golden Valley novel. Will this brooding Gold Valley cowboy find his redemption this Christmas? Cowgirl Rose Daniels is determined to play matchmaker to ensure her beloved sister will meet someone under the mistletoe. She enlists the reluctant help of family friend Logan Heath, but his insistence that she doesn't understand chemistry is exasperating, until they share one electrifying moment that shows her exactly what chemistry is all about, and it becomes outrageously irresistible, intriguing. Logan hates the holidays. They are a painful reminder of his family that he lost, and a time of the year he always wants to spend on his own. But Rose refuses to let him. Logan's worked for years to keep his attraction to her under wraps, but she's his best friend's younger sister, and she couldn't be more off limits. He's the last cowboy that innocent Rose should ever kiss, but this Christmas maybe Logan will become the only cowboy she ever wants. This charming and very sensual contemporary is must for fans of passion. Publishers on Cowboy Christmas Redemption starred the review. And I have to say, there's some steamy hot moments in this book that I'm not sharing with you. But, whoo-wee, baby. Okay, we're going to start in at page 10. Now, Rose and Logan, they work together on a ranch. And that they're out kind of doing their everyday thing. And I'm hoping this computer will let me make this video. We're going to start on page 10. Rose, get your head out of the clouds and your feet back in the mud. We've got work to do. She glanced over at Logan, who was standing there looking taciturn, his tan cowboy hat pulled down over his eyes. He was wearing a matching work jacket and gloves, and seeing him appropriately dressed made her skin prickle with goosebumps. More aware of the chill in the air than she'd been at the moment, she ran out with nothing but a t-shirt and denim button-up shirt that she left open. She was adapting slowly to the change in the weather, resenting it. She preferred to be outside in the sunshine, and she liked crisp, clear fall weather. But that often saw her removing the outer layer as the day wore on, but they were beginning to turn the corner into outright winter weather here in mid-November. And she was not prepared. I'm just thinking, she said. That's what concerns me, he said, a smile tipping his mouth upward. When you think, things seem to happen and somebody has to clean up the mess. Nobody asked you to do it, she said. Anyway, I seem to recall a time, though several years ago, when you got to thinking that jumping off your bike that rise down by the north pasture was a good idea. And you ran into the barbed wire fence, and I cleaned up that mess. I was a teenager. Yes, and I was 7, yet I still remember it. Something flickered in his blue eyes, but he didn't say anything more. Instead, he turned back to the fence that he was repairing, and she picked up a wire cutter and joined him on the line. I want to help Iris find someone, she mused. Rose, hear me out. She's alone. It's going to be Christmas, and I hate the thought of that. She's always alone. Seems to me at this point it's her choice, and you should respect it. Rose shook her head. Nobody wants to be alone. You are also alone, he pointed out. I'm 23. I have no designs about being alone for quite some time. This is not about me. I want nothing more than to see people I love most settled and happy. Iris is happy, he said. What if she isn't? That was page 10 and 11. Don't drop the book, Donna. Page 12. Then she will do something to fix it, or she won't. But either way, it's none of your business. She made an exasperated sound. It's not about whether or not it is my business. And anyway, that's not true. We are a family, in a way that few other people will ever be. We had to raise each other. Pretty sure Ryder did most of that. I know, she said. She had been 6 years old when her parents had died. She barely remembered them now. She remembered not understanding for a very long time. She had grieved when she had been given the news because she had known that the death was terrible. But forever was something that she hadn't been able to wrap her mind around. And there was a point where it felt like they would surely come back. They had to. But of course she had started to realize that the way of her brother's mouth was set, always turning down, meant something bad. That he didn't go away to college like he had planned to. When she was 7 and she asked Logan while she was bandaging his hand up, she'd been feeling proud because she knew where the first aid kit was, knew how to help with his cuts, and she hadn't been scared of the blood. She'd felt helpful and she felt strong, like she mattered. When are they coming back? He just looked at her with those blue eyes, and she seen fear in them. Fear that hadn't been there after he had cut himself up. It was the fear that got to her. He hadn't spoken for a moment. They aren't, he said finally. How come? They love us. Of course they do, Rosie, he said. That was page 12. Here's page 13. Logan was the only person who had ever called her that. She thought it was for little kids and had been annoyed by it until that moment in the barn when she had been bandaging his arm and he used that low, husky voice that made her feel smooth in spite of the sharp, dark hurts inside her heart. Then why are they staying away? They didn't choose to, but dying is forever. Forever is a long time, she said. I know, that's the thing, it's forever. She hadn't cried. Even then, she had known there was no point in crying because forever was forever. Whether she cried or not, she understood it then. And Logan had been there for her, like he was there for everything, dishing out advice and giving support. The problem was he still did it, like she was 7 years old. I actually wasn't asking your opinion, she said archly. That's fine. You don't need to ask for it to get it. You are so annoying, she said, and yet you insist on talking to me. We are fixing a fence. If we didn't talk, it would be boring. Then don't complain when I make it interesting by giving you my opinions. You are a man who thinks a bit highly of himself, she said, but she wasn't actually mad at him. She could never really be mad at Logan, not after everything. I think highly of myself because no one else will. He winked, and then she had to suppress a silly grin that tried to spread over her face, and when she didn't allow it to, her cheeks prickled slightly. It was strange, but she chose to ignore it. That was 12, 13, and here comes 14. Who do you think would make a good match for Iris? Don't look at me like that, he said. What? Not me. Don't be silly. Of course not you. You're basically our brother, but there must be somebody else, somebody who is calm and steady and not a cowboy. Not for Iris. Iris needs somebody who likes to be indoors, likes to read, she likes to talk about books and TV, and she loves to bake. She likes yarn. So, Logan said slowly, you should get her a cat. I know, she carried on as if he hadn't spoken of cats. Elliot Johns. He would be perfect. Logan's eyebrows lowered and went flat. The water filtration guy? Yes, I mean he knows everybody in town because of his job, and he must have a good reputation or people wouldn't keep using him. So somebody with a job like that is pretty safe, I would think. Plus, he's sort of a soft-spoken and good at making conversation. I thought you wanted to get Iris some excitement. I do, but the right kind of excitement, the kind that suits her. Would you ever in a million years have thought that Pansy kind of excitement would be a cowboy ex-convict? Pansy is an anomaly, and she doesn't count. Okay, well, good to know that you just get to decide who you think you know. Pull the stick out of your rear, Logan. Look, matchmaker, you meddle in people's lives in your own time. It's fence-fixing time. Fine, but tonight when we go to the bar, I'm going to put my feelers out. God save us all from your feelers, he said. I'll be successful, you can bet. That was page 14 and 15. Logan already needed another drink. They'd only been at the Gold Valley Saloon for 20 minutes. This time of year was a witch anyway. His slow slide into a seasonal Grinchhood began in November and continued all through December. He didn't do Christmas, not at all. Not since his mother died. So he was already prone to the irritation as it was, and Rose was being particularly Rose. There was no stopping Rose Daniels when she was on a tear, and Logan knew better than anybody. She was a frantic lightning storm wrapped up in skin, and she drove him crazy. In all ways that could apply. Much to his endless chagrin, he had known pretty little Rose Daniels since she was a child. His mother had been best friends with her parents, and after they died, he moved in with the family and especially became part of it. But there was something about Rose. She got under his skin and made it itch. and that itch transformed into something wholly inappropriate after she'd gone from a girl to a woman, which had happened seemingly overnight. She'd gone to bed 17 and a pain in his butt, and woken up 18, still a pain in his butt, and recognizably far too pretty for his own good. No, Rose wasn't like a sister to him, but the feelings he had for her were deep, special, and forged in fire. He had known that long before he ever found her beautiful. He would be her protector when she was 7 years old, looking at him with those eyes that were far too serious and asking when their parents were going to come back, because death was a concept that was simply too big for her to grasp. He had vowed it then and then kept it now, but sometimes the kid needed protection from her own damn self. He turned protecting her from him into an art form. It was her harebrained schemes that he just couldn't quite manage. The woman had a habit of grating on him, and tonight she was going to test every single one of his nerves. He had a feeling, more than a feeling. He could think of nothing that Iris would like less than to have her younger sister trying to find her a pity date, because whether Rose realized that or not, that's what she was doing. And he recognized it, well, because he saw what Rose recognized in Iris. He did. She spent most of her nights at home baking and knitting when she could go out. It was with the whole family. At this point, it wasn't like he did a whole lot else. Not since his libido transformed into something spiky and untrustworthy. Yeah, sometimes he went out of town and found a woman, but he didn't like hooking up there. Iris hadn't come out with them tonight, and from the looks of things, Ryder and Sammy were going to have to call it an early evening, which would leave them with the West and Pansy. He was fine with that. He liked the man Pansy was engaged to. They were going to have a Christmas wedding, which was likely half of what Rose was amped up about romance and seeing her sister happy. He got Rose a bottle of her favorite beer and went back to the table. He snuck a beer a time or two, staring when she was about 19. Ryder would be so angry if he knew. He had been a stickler for the rite of passage, and since all Rose really wanted to do was have a beer out on the back porch, he never really seen the harm in it. As a result, he had a pretty good idea of what she enjoyed. "He's here," Rose whispered. "Who?" He sat down, and as he sat down at the table next to her and passed her the beer. "Elliot." "Rose, what did I say?" "When have I ever listened to you?" "Well, you should listen to me. You should listen to me right now." "What are you saying exactly?" she asked, her tone far too sweet. "To leave well enough alone." "What are you two whispering about down there?" Pansy asked. Rose's older sister was looking at them keenly. "Nothing," Logan said. "Logan doesn't approve of me," Rose said. "Well," Pansy said, "I should think that would be a goal of yours." "Yes, I don't really care about whether or not I'm meeting with anyone's approval, it has to be said." That wasn't strictly true, and he knew it. Rose wasn't a rebel so much as she was exuberant. She acted before she thought and spoke sooner than she acted. "I'm exhausted," Sammy said, "even though I really do want to stay and hear about what all Logan disapproves of." Sammy was 5 months pregnant, and Logan knew that her desire to be in the middle of the fray often lost out over her current level of energy. He was happy for Ryder and his friend, able to get some over the trauma of his past and begin to make a new life for himself, a new family. It had become completely obvious to him that Ryder had been in love with Sammy for the last decade and a half. His friend had denied it, but Logan had known. And it turned out he was right. 16, 17, and this is 18. That had made him feeling slightly uncomfortable, given that he currently was judging Rose for trying to get involved in other people's love life. But he had not gotten involved in Ryder's, not without his asking for input. Anyway, in some ways he felt extra connected to Sammy. The two of them were the odd ones out. They weren't getting related to the Daniels clan, but they had found out themselves a part of the Hope Springs Ranch, bonded together by tragedies of life. For Logan, it had been the loss of his mother. For Sammy, the fact that her parents had been absolutely terrible. Her mother was still alive, but she wasn't part of Sammy's life. For all the good they'd done raising her, she might as well have lost them. "See you tomorrow," Logan said. "Bye," Rose said. "We'll hang out for a while," Pansy said. Though he could tell by the way West was looking at his fiancée, he was hoping they'd make it an early night for pretty obvious reasons. Logan's stomach tightened up because that would mean being alone with Rose. And he didn't like that, not one bit. He already played with fire when it came to late nights and a little bit of beer with her, and she had no idea how close she'd come to be about being burned. No, he would never burn her. He just wouldn't. Never once had he thought about seriously acting on any of his feelings and that he experienced for her over the last couple of years, but he'd been in situations where they'd been closer to the surface than he wanted them, and he wasn't about to put himself back there again. "I'm going to make a move," Rose said, as Ryder and Sammy filed out of the salon. "What the hell are you talking about?" And that was when the irresistible brunette scampered across the salon and approached Elliot Johns. He gritted his teeth and watched in horror as she began to talk to him, and Logan could see interest lighting up in the other man's face. He was also absolutely certain that Rose was over there being an ambassador for Iris, and that was only her reason. Elliot clearly thought otherwise. "Oh, Rose, you don't know what you're playing at," is what he's thinking. About 30 seconds later, they were crossing the bar, and she brought him back beer to the table. She had brought him back to the table. "Logan, will you get another beer? Elliot's going to join us for the evening." That's 17, 18, and 19. We're going to move to page 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. I'll probably stop at page 30 tonight. "Okay," she said, "see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" West asked. "You know, because we're all meeting here tomorrow," Rose said suddenly with struck inspiration. Pansy cast her some side eye. "I'll talk to you tomorrow morning," she said. Logan shifted beside her, and she felt that shift in the air. He was that kind of guy, big and solid, and exactly the kind of partner that you wanted working out on the ranch. Logan could lift his own weight and then some, and at that same time he never made her feel like she might not be doing her share just because she was a woman and smaller than him. 23, 24. Now he had other ways of making her feel small and silly, and she had a feeling that he was gearing up for one. She looked over at him. His face was set in stone, and he didn't look like he was planning to say anything at all. That was almost worse somehow. "We're meeting here tomorrow," she said, deciding not to give him any space to Logan at all. He could keep his disapproving shifts to himself. "The group of us, you should come," she said to Elliot. "Give me your phone number. That way I can get in touch with you if anything changes. But we all should be here around 8. "Okay," he said, looking happy about that. "Yeah, we'll all be here. Ryder, his wife, Sammy, our other sister Iris. Maybe she can bring some of her baked goods." "Great," he said. She took her phone out, and he gave her his number, which she programmed into it easily. "Excellent. We better get going. You know, ranch work, very early rising." "Yeah, me too," he said. "Water filtration systems won't install themselves." "No," Rose said, forcing a smile. "I don't imagine they will, and my cows they won't castrate themselves. Those idiots. No thumbs." Somehow she could feel a groan coming on from Logan without actually making any noise. She didn't know how he managed that total silent disapproval that somehow rumbled within her. Elliot, for his part, laughed a little bit too hard, Rose thought. "See you tomorrow," she said. She stood up and swept out of the saloon, Logan on her heels. "What the hell was that?" he asked, once they were headed toward the truck. "A setup," she said. "He thinks you like him." The idea was so ridiculous, Rose dismissed it immediately. "He doesn't," she said. "I'm too young for him." Logan stopped walking. She could feel him staring at the side of her face. "What? How old do you think he is?" "I don't know, 32. Logan huffed. "I'm 33. "Yeah," she said. "Anyway, he's going to meet Iris. He's going to love Iris." "Do you hate Iris?" "No," Rose said emphatically. "I love Iris, and I want her to be happy. He's practical. He owns his own business." "I think he's a subcontractor." "He's still a business owner," she insisted, "and is doing something stable and profitable. It's exactly the kind of stability that Iris would admire." He talked about water filtration for 25 minutes, and we could have talked about cows for longer than that. "Yeah, but cows are interesting." "My point," she said, "is that we all find different things interesting. It isn't that he's uninteresting, it's just that we are uneducated about the topic." 24, 25, 26. "I'm educated now," he said. "About 1,000 times more educated than I ever wanted to be. And I think you're making a mistake." "I'm not. We're going to go out tomorrow night, and Iris is going to meet him, and everything is going to be great." "Why do you feel the need to do this?" "It's not that I need to, it's just that, think about it, Logan. There's all these things in the world, that all these people, and that life is so fragile, it's precious. What if people miss out on the chance to make their connection because they're busy working, or just because someone needed to intervene? And you think that someone has to be you." If Iris ends up alone, it might be because of me, she said, the words bursting from her before she could stop them. Logan's blue eyes went far too sharp, and she didn't like it. It made her feel strange and exposed, and it pushed her up to keep on talking. Iris has taken care of me all her life, basically. She didn't go to school dances. She didn't date. She was home cooking for us. For me. I was a kid. The longest. And I was the one who was the... She's the last one single. Except you, he pointed out. It's not the same. How isn't it the same? I mean, Logan, I'm 23. I'm not remotely ready to settle down or anything like that. I love my life. Maybe Iris loves her life. That made her pause. She thought of her sweet sister, who only ever showed how funny and bright she was in a room surrounded by her family, who liked to bake and knit and spend her evenings at home. And she just couldn't get past the fact that she wondered if Iris had made the best of the box she had been pushed into. Maybe it would have been who she was eventually, but not as a young woman. Maybe if she hadn't had to raise Rose, she would have been dating. Maybe she had been settled at home knitting with a husband and children of her own, and not in a house that was, well, it was different now. Ryder and Sammy were married, and it was Sammy's house now, too. They'd be having a baby soon. Even Ryder, who had devoted all that he was taking care of them after their parents' death, had found someone and was moving on. Iris remained. And how could she ever move on if Iris didn't, knowing she might be the cause of her sister's current situation? And so much of what she does is because she had to settle into that role too soon. She's basically a spinster aunt, and she's only 31. Please say this to Iris, because I have a feeling it would really go over well. I have said it to Iris, Rose said. Okay, not in those terms. She didn't want to hurt her sister's feelings. Logan shook his head and jerked his truck door open, and Rose climbed to the passenger seat beside him. I'm telling you, he said, this is not a great idea. I'm sorry, Logan. If this were a matter of cows, I might listen to you. But this is a matter of people. And you think you have superior experience with people than me. I think that you deliberately don't have a lot of experience with people. You ranch, you drink, you sleep. That's 26, 27. Here comes 28. I do things, he said, his tone exceedingly dry. What things? He was driving, so he didn't look at her, but again she could feel that what he was thinking. She didn't know how he managed to make her feel his feelings so clear to her that she could feel them inside her own chest sometimes. She shifted uncomfortably because she had a feeling that what he was thinking of. Well, things she didn't want to think about concerning Logan. He was her friend, her co-worker. She didn't need to go thinking of him as a man doing things men did. Never mind, she muttered. Well, don't ask if you don't want to have a conversation. I'll bet you that they hit it off, she continued, happy to step away from the more disconcerting part of the conversation. Fine, he said, you're on. If I win, I get to set you up. Not a damn chance. So you're afraid that I'll win? He said nothing. You are, she said. You're afraid that I'll win. Fine, he said. If you successfully hook the two of them up, you have my permission to seek out someone for me. She felt immediately flat, because the fact that he agreed likely did mean that he didn't believe that she was right about this. But she did. She didn't need his vote of confidence to be sincere. It's a deal, you'll see. Oh, I imagine I'll see plenty. And with that, Rose decided she was done with him, done having this conversation. Sometimes there was no one more infuriating in her life than Logan Heath. But he was the closest co-worker, and in many ways had grown into being one of her best friends, except an older, grumpy, superior best friend who could be a serious pain in the butt sometimes. So really another brother. She was going to succeed with Iris, and then she would set Logan up too. She wouldn't let him put a damper on her plans. On that she was determined. That was 28, 29. Here's 30. What's this I hear about you going out to the bar tonight? Logan set out an exasperated snort as he approached by his friend the next day. He stopped moving in the middle of the scooping of a shovel of stall shavings. Your sister is cooking up one of her harebrained schemes. He didn't have to specify which sister. Ryder knew without needing to be told. And Logan could see a train wreck coming from a mile away, but Rose wasn't going to be convinced. She wasn't going to be convinced until she forced everybody into an awkward situation. She had done that with himself and Sammy, and thankfully the two of them were self-actualized enough that they weren't into each other enough. that it hadn't bothered him at all. Logan had known that it was Ryder who was in love with Sammy, and he had been reasonably confident that Sammy was into Ryder and had absolutely no designs on Logan at all. It had also been confirmed when Sammy had gotten pregnant and the father was Ryder. Now the two of them were married, which had basically how Logan had thought it should be, and frankly confirmed that he had a slightly better eye for these things than Rose. In Rose's defense, though, she was young. As she had pointed out, 32, and that was too old for her. Let me see. I love this book. Can you tell? It's just one of my favorites because it's by my favorite author. Let's see. Well, we can go to page 33, it looks like. At 23, she was determined, going around trying to write checks that she didn't have the experience to cash. He tried not to remember the way he had felt when she said that 32 being old. It had been like a barb under his skin, made him feel exactly what he had been concerned that he might be for the past couple of years, nothing more than a dirty old man. Hell, it was just wrong to notice that his best friend's little sister was hot as hell. But it was more than hot, it was a chemistry thing, which he had also experienced enough to know. It seemed to be one-sided, which was a gift in itself, because Rose was like a determined little terrier, and when she got her teeth sunk into an idea, she went full bore with it. And the last thing he needed in the world was Rose to desire to sink her teeth into him. He gritted his teeth against the kick of arousal he experienced in that thought. In front of her damn brother. "What is she up to?" Ryder asked. "She thinks that she's going to set Iris up." Ryder frowned. "What, with a man?" "Yep." Ryder let out a howl. "No crap." "Seriously," he said. "Well, I have a feeling that's not going to go over very well for her." "Nope." "Are you going to go?" "Yes," Logan said without hesitation. "Why, I think you should let her make her mistake." And he realized that no matter how silly he thought it was, he couldn't let her go off and do this on her own, because the fact of the matter, Elliot was going to believe that Rose was interested in him, and she was officially biting off more than she could chew, and he actually wasn't willing to leave her with that. It wasn't because he couldn't stand an idea of another man touching her. No way in hell. He was just protective. "Hey, I'm just not willing to miss the show," he lied. "Better you than me. Sammy's energy is at a premium, and I think I would rather be at home with her than out watching Rose be in a heap of trouble." "Hell," Logan said, "if Iris decides not to go out, we'll all be better off." "You could warn her," Ryder said. "I could," Logan responded. "Of course, then Rose would kill me. Anyway, you're right. Rose needs to learn a lesson." He was going to be there, granted, but the fact of the matter that Rose did need to learn the lesson. She was up in people's business far too often, and he could see that this was headed for absolute disaster. It might be necessary for her to take this fall, but he was damn well going to be there when she did. Because that's what he did. He protected her. He'd done it all her life. But then his feelings had begun to shift, begin to change. And after that shift, there had been moments, late nights on the porch drinking beer, times when they'd been out working and their bodies would brush against each other, and he was close enough to press his lips to her neck, and if he just angled his head, it had forced him to make a choice between changing what they were and staying her protector, and as always had been. When working with her, he had started to become a strain, when he began to notice that softness of her body when he would press up against her while they were wrangling a calf, or notice the scent of her when the breeze kicked up when they were out in the field together. He recommitted himself to keeping her safe, even if it meant keeping her safe from him, because this place was his home. Because Ryder Daniels had supported him through the worst thing in life, while grieving his own losses. That was page 30, 31, 32, 33. We're going to start in at page 35 tomorrow, hopefully. But you can tell this book is going to get an outstanding rating. Probably 100. That means you've got to read it. So with that being said, see you tomorrow.